Hi, everyone. On behalf of STMA, welcome to this week's virtual town hall meeting. We would like for this to be an interactive experience. So if you have a question or something to share, please use the chat feature to type a question. The chat is located along the bottom of the screen and will pop up in the participant panel. You can also raise your hand, and when you are called upon, you can speak to the panelists live. The raise hand feature is located at the bottom right of the participant panel. Your moderator today is David Pinsonneault, CSFM CPRP from Lexington DPW in Massachusetts. So thanks everyone for joining us. You can go ahead, Dave.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for jumping in. Today's meeting is going to be focused on wellness strategies for sports field managers. And our goal, as always, is to share info, learn in real time how everyone is adapting to the changing environment, and learn from each other. So today we're going to be talking about different strategies that to hopefully help you improve your emotional wellness, manage your stress that's out there, and have a better work-life balance. And I think during this time, we can certainly all learn from some of the challenges that we're facing, both as managers in our jobs and for what we do when we get back home, and the difficulty or successes that we've had in managing through that. And I'm happy that we've got three great panelists to take us through that process. We have Lisa Goatley, who's an MS LPC from the Cascade Group. We have Tammy Jackson, who's an MS licensed psychologist from Healing Grace Counseling Center. And then from a perspective of someone in the field, we have Josh McPherson, CSFM from Mizzou Athletics. So again, we want the conversation to be apolitical. We're not trying to predict the future, but we're going to talk about various scenarios to help us be prepared for what may lie ahead. We want to recognize that it's right to not have all the answers all the time, but we want you to share your questions, and then we can share any thoughts that we have from there. If you have follow-up questions, again, Kristen mentioned the raise hand feature. Just use that feature. I'll go ahead and click on those as we go to see what we have. And even though it's a town hall format, you'll have some presentations. We definitely want this to be an interactive presentation. So jump in with questions and we'll get that discussion going. So I think that will be good for everybody. So what we're going to start with, and we'll hand it over to the panelists, is some thoughts on behaviors people have been expressing associated with the pandemic at the beginning and throughout. We're certainly not at the end, but we'll take it from there. So I'll throw that right over and start with Lisa.
So I'm Lisa. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I practice in Blacksburg, Virginia. I'm here in my office today. I've come back briefly. I know many of us have been teleworking. One of the things that I began seeing early on, we went into quarantine here in Blacksburg on Friday, May 13th as sort of the date that we mark it from. That was the date that our public schools closed. And we sent our university students home here at Virginia Tech just prior to that. When they went home for spring break, they never came back, or they were supposed to never come back. From the outset, we began seeing, certainly here in my practice, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, certainly a manifestation of a whole lot of stress. There was just a whole lot of uncertainty in our world at that point in time. None of us knew what this was really going to look like, where we were going. On a personal level, my assumption was we would step back into quarantine for 2 or 3 weeks, and then all this would be over and life would be back to normal. And here we are in July, and we are still in the midst of this. So certainly seeing the stress response from a lot of people and a lot of anxiety. As human beings, we don't deal with uncertainty very well. And so the stress of that, along with all of the ways that our lives changed in unusual ways. So I guess I would say, there's just been a lot of general anxiety about there, worry, uncertainty. None of us knows what the world is going to look like. We're all trying to keep sterile homes. The stress of that. We're worried about our families getting sick with COVID. We're worried about, are we going to have jobs after this is all over? What is our children's education going to look like? There's just been a lot of general worry, anxiety, and stress around this. Tammy, as a mental health professional, I'm going to pass it off to you to share some of your experiences about what you've seen.
Yeah, much of the same thing, Lisa. The anxiety, just the shock that this is how it is now. I think I would add to that a lot of the family stress. What I work with a lot of families and parenting issues, and just seeing parents go from not having to work with their kids all the time to suddenly I'm home and I have to be a parent nonstop, no breaks, no time for ourselves anymore, and just on all the time trying to care for our children and manage the as it goes on, the internal conflicts in the home. My brother's picking on me again, just no relief from the sibling conflict, the interactions there in the home and the family being much more stressful as well as seeing the rise in the depression and the generalized anxiety. I did notice in the beginning a lot of introverts saying they liked this quarantine. So I had many people who had anxiety for a long time going, wow, it's much better now. I don't have to go out in public. I don't have to deal with all these things. So for a while that was okay, but I'm beginning to see even those introverts getting tired of, having to be so careful in their social interactions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I had many people say I've been practicing for quarantine my whole life. I'm,
Right.
very happy to stay home.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Right. But they're tired. Yeah.
Yeah, well, as sports field managers, we definitely don't want to be quarantined. We want to be out there doing what we do. So let me turn it over to Josh and get his perspective on that.
Yeah, talking about the anxiety, I mean, I think it's the same for me as it is for my staff. We're all trying to figure out exactly what the future actually means. Speaking from a college athletics perspective, are we going to play college football? And if we don't, what does that mean for all of us in our jobs? So it's been kind of difficult, just even the unknown. Literally just sitting here as our meeting started, I saw a tweet that said SEC just delayed all competition until September 1. So it just changes all the time. And I'm a big anti-Twitter, anti-Facebook person, but I found I've had to be on it because it's the only way you get information because it changes so fast. We find out more about our jobs that way now than actually in person with no one really around. So it's that, and then it's managing the family dynamic. It's like we get to go have fun out working on the fields right now, and then come back home. And like my wife, as a professor, has been teaching literally nonstop between teaching and teaching the kids. So then trying to balance that when you get home also. And now they're starting to repopulate with actual more staff. We're finding that all these protocols are going in place to keep everyone safe. And then it's kind of odd because we're like, well, we've been working. What were the protocols then? So it's kind of this interesting dynamic going on with staff.
Yeah, just to expand on that a little bit, myself working in a municipality, having the workforce, everybody else was being sent home, and yet we still have to be mowing. We still have to keep the water flowing. We still have to keep the wastewater flowing, those kinds of things, and really trying to explain to staff that you are essential, even though you're not police and fire, and really dealing with those emotions that they had. Well, it's like a ghost town. Nobody's around, but yet we're here doing our job. So, dealing with those things made it more of a challenge at the beginning for sure. Okay, so we'll move on, and then we talked about some of the behaviors, and then we want to look at how can some of these behaviors be addressed. So stress, anxiety, depression, either with staff or with family. What to do and what not to do, because I think both of those are important. So we'll go back to you, Lisa, to kick that one off.
So I guess I would say that communication, that's always the buzzword, right? Communication. I think one of the things that we all have to be mindful about is that when we're under stress, we tend not to respond at our best sometimes. So I think we have to be careful about how we, the space that we're in. And I know we've got self-care, we're taking care of ourselves a little later on in the town hall meeting to discuss, but I definitely think communication, as Josh mentioned, sometimes we find out more from outside sources, from Twitter or, the rumor mill, the gossip, about what's happening with our jobs, and sometimes that can lead to a breakdown in communication with our administration. So I would say trying to have open and transparent communication, and sometimes that may mean that you have to say to your staff, we just don't really know what this looks like. Or, you know, as you mentioned with the safety protocols, one day we're doing this, the next day, you know, we're doing that. As we talked about reopening my office, we all moved to telemedicine and everyone's been at home. When we started coming back into the office, we had this protocol for how this was going to go. And the first day that I got here, that was not the protocol. There was a different protocol, you know, and I felt a little annoyed, and it was hard. And then I had to remember, oh, wait, this is a rapidly evolving situation. We're all just doing the best that we can. You know, we think one thing, then, you know, something else different needs to happen. You know, sometimes the message doesn't always get conveyed down the line to the people who need to hear it. And so just trying to be mindful about how we respond to those things and trying to communicate as openly as we can. Communicate up with your administration, communicate across translaterally with your colleagues and people on the same level, and communicate down to the people that you manage. Even if sometimes that communication is, we don't really know what this fully looks like, but as soon as we find out, we'll let you know.
So Lisa, what are some of the things, have you had to do things differently with family and being at home and then coming back to work? Different, the ways that you treat those situations? And I know your husband, so.
Right. So my husband, Mike, and I, he's a professor at Virginia Tech. He's the turfgrass professor at Virginia Tech. And Mike and I, for many years, have been doing, speaking at conference on balancing work and family. And the focus has always been, people want more time at home with family, right? It's like, I'm always at work. How do I have a better balance? Meaning, how do I add more time with family? And the interesting thing about this quarantine that I sort of heard from people is like, okay, I've had enough family. You know, like there's been way too much together time. Like now I want to go back to work. So, you know, we swung from one extreme to the other, right? And so I don't know, wait, I've lost track of the question. What was it? Like, if I had it to do differently, what would I do? I'm not sure, you know, of course, you know, we have that old saying, hindsight's 20/20. You know, we have information that's, you know, that's continually evolving. You know, I think what we all have to remember is that we've all been making the best decisions we can in the moment with the information that we have. So, you know, going back and saying, you know, would I start wearing a mask sooner? You know, maybe. You know, would I, you know, I don't know. You know, I've transitioned back into the office. I'm seeing a few people, you know, in person out there working. I might regret that at some point in time. I don't know, you know, maybe I should stay in all telemedicine, but I sort of think, you know, I want to sit in a space where I sort of assume that we're all just, you know, doing the best we can. We're making the best decisions we can in the moment with the information that we have.
Yeah. Tammy, what about you? Some things maybe dealing with stress and anxiety, both with staff and family, that to do and not to do.
And that to play on her communication and assume the best. I liked how you were saying, you know, everybody's on edge. The anxiety is high. We tend to have a shorter fuse. We're more worried. It's easy to slip into negative thinking patterns and make negative assumptions about other people, whether that's staff or family members, and to really, you know, have to be mindful, and taking care of ourselves will help us do this, but to be able to assume the best, that whenever that coworker comes in and they're mad, you assume they've got a reason for that anger or that frustration, and to make time to listen. An effective communicator listens probably more than they speak. So making sure if you've got some tension in the air, or anybody that you're dealing with, especially during stressful times, you make time to sit to listen, to just say, hey, let's take a seat and chat about it, and really listen actively and care with care, and assuming the best while they're talking. So I think that's key to managing this, is that we don't we make sure we assume the best and we listen.
Okay, and how about you, Josh, in dealing with your staff and your administrators, some of the things that you've run into that you would recommend or not recommend as you're going through this process?
Yeah, well, I found, you know, from the beginning, I'm a big planner, so it was like planning out all these different budgets and everything, and then found it's almost not worth it because it changes so fast. So I have like general guidelines, and then talking with the staff too, I kind of said we're built for this because we never really ever get to do what we want to do anyway. So we don't really have too long-term of planning. So it's kind of like it's just different. It's not coaches and it's just the information in general. And then too, with the communication, I'm having the hard time of being the empathy of like, I'm in this with you, but also not being the leader of the complaining bandwagon is difficult too sometimes, you know, because it is difficult. But we're all going through it. So it's kind of something similar. Another thing too with the staff is, you know, we're still trying to get time away. And since they've canceled all overtime here, you know, it's kind of like, well, we're not working the same hours. So it's almost kind of like it's not quite pick your own hours, but if you've got something and you want to do something, do it. You know, it's not as critical because we still kind of need the coverage 7 days a week, but now we don't necessarily all have to be here all together all the time. So it's kind of more loose in that sense, and giving them freedom if they need to take care of something at home.
Yeah. You mentioned budgets. As a municipality, we got our budget approved, but half the things are on hold until October, when we find out if the state comes through with aid and all of that. So there's a lot of factors at play there. People worrying about job security and things like that. I'll keep it with you, Josh, for a minute. We did have a question come in from one of our people listening in. What strategies would you suggest to stay positive in the workplace when there is a very uncertain future as you're moving forward?
I mean, that's difficult because it's one of those things it's hard to do myself. If I'm fully admitting it, you know, it's really interesting too how the whole mindset changed, because in the beginning when we kind of got shut down in spring, all the techniques I've always talked about for all the years, I felt like I didn't need, because all of a sudden not having the demand of getting fields ready in March and April and the coaches not calling me, it was like a total role reversal at the house almost. My wife was, like I said, is a professor, so she was going through all this stress of trying to figure out how to teach online from the house with the kids there. And I was just like, all right, I'm teaching the kids. This is great. You know, and now we're back in it, and now we're getting closer and closer to realizing that what we do, like I said, specifically to college athletics, that is kind of my mindset. It is difficult. It's, you know, for me, I keep telling them I'll fight for them every way I can. I'm coming up with different plans. Like, this is why we need to stay employed. This is why we need this. And just letting them all know I'm there for them is kind of the best, you know, psychology. Even with all the budgets, every time I did a budget that I was asked for, I kept all my staff and just kept reducing inputs and kind of, I'm focusing big on the staff and doing what I can for them and know I'm there for them.
Okay, thanks. Lisa, how about you? Some strategies that you would recommend to try to help people stay positive, again, when the future is just uncertain?
I think it's getting harder and harder. You know, there's this thing that we've been talking about called quarantine fatigue. You know, at the start of quarantine, we were all like, we can do this. You know, we all made lists of those closets we want to clean out and the healthy meals we wanted to cook. And I'm going to learn yoga, and, you know, I'm going to get up and get dressed every day and walk first thing in the morning. And, you know, like that was good. And now we're all just like, oh my gosh, you know, how much longer? Like, never mind, I'm just going to put on the same pair of sweatpants that I had on yesterday. Right. So we're all just getting really tired of quarantine, and it gets harder and harder to maintain our motivation to do well and you know, keep things going. I definitely think self-care is a piece of that, right? Like being attentive to how we're caring for our bodies. And remember, the brain is an organ like any other organ in the body. So, you know, be careful about sleep, get adequate sleep, you know, good nutrition, exercise is important. You know, be mindful about your use of alcohol. You know, Tammy can probably speak to this too. We've seen an increase in, you know, problems with alcohol and other substance use. You know, some of the things that kept us going in life, you know, no longer exist. Like, you know, there's no reason to be on time for, you know, you don't have to get to work at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so be mindful about your alcohol consumption and nicotine use and things like that. So I think good self-care is important. I also think as a strategy, Josh, you mentioned something, right? There's so much that's out of our control right now. Any ways that we can offer people the ability to make choices, as you know, like Josh, as you said, like we need coverage 7 days a week, but there's a lot of flexibility, allowing people to exercise some agency over when they might want to come in, or, you know, there may be coverage needed at a certain time, or we may have a certain job that needs to get done. But if people can have agency over saying when that's going to get done, so they at least feel like they have some power and some control in their lives, even over some small things like that, like, you know, this needs to be done, or how can we get it done versus saying, okay, you're going to do it this way. Finding little ways that, people can exercise agency and control and at least feel a little bit like, they have the power to make some decisions. And I definitely think if you're in a position of leadership, right, like it's really, really difficult. You have to maintain it not only for yourself or for your family, but for your staff as well, trying to keep a positive mindset. So whatever you have to do that, right, like, maybe it's time to read an inspirational leadership book, or, take that course that you've been talking about taking on, how to be a good leader, to just sort of give you that little extra oomph that you need to carry yourself and your staff through this really difficult time. That may be something to think about right now. I'm generally recommending that people read inspirational literature, that they subscribe to an inspirational message of the day that you receive by text message or by email, that you watch inspiring videos. Those are, all those things that feed us are, things that we need right now, because so much of life is really draining.
Yeah, just one of the things that we've continued to do is still have our weekly management team staff meetings, because a few said, oh, what are we going to meet about? And I said, no, it's good for all of us to just get together once a week, even on Zoom, although we're all back in the office somewhat, but just to have that to communicate and go from there. I want to just go to Tammy and just see what strategies you would recommend. Again, positive in the workplace and the future being in question.
Yeah, I think much of it's already been said, but as I was thinking, asking for help and creating a new vision, continuing those staff meetings, or, maybe you haven't heard from some of your coworkers in a while and say, do you have any ideas? Anything new we want to do different? This could be a time for some new thing that we've been wanting to try for some time. And it might be we've got the time to get creative and try something new. So being open to asking for help for new ideas. What else would you like to see happen in the future? And again, open up that room for more communication and more creative future moving forward, as well as remembering, and I know we said this a lot in the beginning, we've been through tough times before, we'll get through this again. This to begin to see this as an opportunity for new, healthier change, where we maybe wouldn't have had that opening in the past, to continue to look at it as opportunity.
So I'm going to keep it with you for a minute, Tammy. We did have another question come in, and it's, how do you watch the news but yet stay in the right mindset? And how do you filter media and news to still feel like the world isn't falling apart? Have you had to deal with those?
Yeah. I tell people, limit how much news you take in to start with. I know we need something of an update to stay informed, but it's easy to, sometimes you can get addicted to watching this channel, that channel, and comparing news stories. And it can get very depressing and you can begin to feel hopeless. But to limit how much of that you take in per day. And again, continue to look for positive people and things you can do with people that bring joy to your life, and not just to focus on that. You can't. And look for the ways you can make a difference in your daily life for somebody.
Okay, how about you, Lisa? What would you recommend on that?
On the news issue?
Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing that Tammy has just said. It was easy in those first few weeks to, just leave the TV on in the background, and that's all anybody was talking about. It was always on. And so, I would just limit it. I would choose a reputable source of news or information and check it, and then turn it off, right? And, let's remember, all of our children have been home as well. So when the news is on, or whatever happens to be on in the background, our children are hearing it as well, and maybe not understanding it in the same context. And let's also remember, some stations want us to watch, and so they sensationalize things, so we will watch. And those types of things are not necessarily good for our brains, and it's not good for our children as well to hear those things. So I would limit that consumption. Just remain informed, choose a reputable news source, remain informed, then turn it off and go on with your day, would be my recommendation as well.
Okay, and I'm going to go to you, Josh. A little bit different twist. We had another question come in, but with all that's going on in the world right now, how do you talk to younger children about those issues? And is it better to protect them, or should you be honest with them?
Yes.
Yes. All of the above. All right.
No, I mean, it's big. So my kids are 6 and 8. So this is, my wheelhouse.
So I threw it to
now.
you.
Yeah. So yeah, we are very truthful about what's happening. And what we found is we have to be real careful about how we tell things too, because then they take maybe my wife's and mine opinion more than maybe forming their own. You hear them say things that, are like, I was like, oh, maybe we're pushing our agenda a little too much, But no, I think we're very truthful about what is happening, and we don't watch a lot of news at the house because we, for some reason, let our kids dominate the TV at night. A lot. So in most of my news, I'm kind of anti-news all the time. That's why I kind of don't like the social medias. I feel like I'm seeking the news, trying to be on top of everything. I'd rather just get it at once. I subscribe to like news services where I get it all in one chunk at a certain part of the day and can read through it. But but we are truthful what's happening and what's going on. They have the same questions like, do we get to go to school? Or like, do we get to go outside and play with our friends? And we keep saying, well, we're going to do our part so we can play college football. No. But that's how I'm doing at our house.
Yeah, I know it's hard to believe I have a 3-year-old grandson, but he knows about putting his mask on when he's out in the public, and we tell him a few things. I mean, he certainly doesn't grasp it, but he has a little bit of understanding. So I'll go back to Lisa. What are some of the things you've been recommending to people in that regard?
You mean relative to talking to their children?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the truthful, provide them with true and accurate information to the best of our ability based on their age, right? So younger kids, you're much more basic. Older kids, you might give a little more information. I think also answer their questions at the level they ask. We have a tendency to over-explain as adults and keep talking and say more than what they've really asked. So, if they ask a question, answer their question. But I think be truthful about what we're dealing with in the world and what our part is and, what we're all trying to accomplish here. And I would also say, leave them with a message of hope, rather than everything being like doom and, bad and terrible, leave them with a message of hope that we're going to get through this. Tough things happen in life. And if we all do our part, do what we need to do, practice good health behaviors. Those are all things that we can do, even though there are, lots that we don't have control over right now. There are some things that we can do and provide them with a list of those things.
Okay, and Tammy, your thoughts on the same subject before we move on?
On the children piece, they
Yeah.
follow our lead as parents. It's more what you do than even what you say. If they see you paying attention, being mindful, being respectful of others, and wearing your mask whenever you're in a place that you need to wear your mask, and teaching them it's about taking care of ourselves and taking care of one another, and doing that more, with ourselves as calm parents, but educated parents, and that's going to be the best teacher, and the best way that they'll learn is by seeing what we do and explaining on their level, answering the questions that they have and helping them understand as best they can at their age. But mostly I would say when it comes to parenting and helping children, I go back to always, be the example more than the lecturer. Be the example.
Let me just add something real quick.
Yeah.
Tammy reminded me of that whenever I see parents and they're going through something, like they're going through a divorce or there's a death or there's cancer, people always ask, how do we help our kids through this? And my general piece of advice to them is to say, children, most of our research on any given dimension shows us that children cope about as well as you do.
Yes.
And so if you're freaking out, they're going to freak out. If you cope well, they will cope adequately as well.
I would say in every session where the parents bring me their kids for therapy, the first thing I say is children can only be as healthy as their parents. You first take care of yourself, and as long as you're doing that, then they're going to see that and they're going to follow your lead. So children are only as healthy as their parents.
Okay. And I know we touched on it a little bit, but let's see if we can expand somewhat. So how can we address our own behaviors and make sure we're taking care of ourselves during this time? So we'll stick with you, Tammy, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it really does start there. The only person we have control over, even in the midst of all this virus, is ourselves, and being responsible for ourselves is number one. So knowing that you're taking care of yourself with good hygiene, sleep, exercise, all of those things that are basic self-care, like we've talked about before, that it has to start there, because if we don't do that, then we can't take care of our kids, then we can't take care of our employees or our coworkers. We can't be there for anybody else. And it really may be hard to do that. And that's why it's always good to have a good partner or somebody that you can talk with that is, on your team while you're trying to do that. So yes, we have to take care of ourselves. And that also involves having somebody to share this journey with, I believe, is a part of taking care of yourself.
Okay, and how about you, Lisa? I know you had explained a little bit before, but go ahead.
So the example I usually give to piggyback on what Tammy was saying is about taking care of yourself. The example that I usually give, because so many people are really good at taking care of others and they feel good when they take care of others. But the example I always use is this. When you're flying on an airplane, of course, none of us have done that in months, but when you're flying and they're giving you the pre-flight instructions and they get to the part about, in the case of depressurization and the oxygen masks drop, what do they always tell you to do?
Hey,
Put your own mask on first, right?
Yeah, then you do the kids, yeah.
Right, put your own mask on first, and there are two reasons for that. Everybody knows the one of the first reasons is because because you want to. Our temptation is always to help somebody else first, right? So you need to put your own mask on first. First off, so that you if you lose consciousness, not only can you not help somebody else. If you don't put your own mask on first to take care of yourself, and you lose consciousness, not only can you not then help somebody else get their mask on, but even if they get their mask on and you have dropped, you become a burden to them. Mm-hmm. So it's not only that you can't help somebody else if you're not in a good position, but then you also become a burden to them. So that's why it's critically important to engage in that self-care first.
And Josh, Tammy mentioned, having somebody not only just at home to talk with, but at work as well. So do you have people like that you can turn to as you're going through some of these questions?
Yeah, well, I have a pretty small staff, so we're all pretty tight. So we talk a lot, and then I've got friends in the industry I talk to about more broader industry type things, and then my wife and I. And what we've kind of found is being in the house with the kids is that we actually need to try to schedule some by ourself time. Has actually been our best self-care. Mm-hmm. And so, and that kind of goes in with the whole scheduling thing. Actually, we're lucky we have family in town right now. So my wife and I went and played tennis this morning, to kind of it's the first time her and I have done anything since March, which is great. But also too, she's been riding her bike. So some mornings I'll come in and then go back home so she can go ride her bike. And then I bought myself a COVID guitar. That was kind of my thing. And I've always wanted to play guitar, so I'm teaching myself guitar, and I do that, put the headphones on and 10 o'clock at night or something we'll play, So we're finding that's for us is kind of, we're doing a lot of stuff together as a family, which is unbelievable. We love it, but also trying to get a little bit of by ourselves time has been great for our mental ability, where we can just be in charge of us too.
Oh, great thoughts. All right, we'll move on with our next question, and we'll start with Lisa. So what are some of the best ways you'd recommend to cope with the unknown and things that are outside your control? And some examples could be, people not wearing masks or social distancing, or a disruption of what we would call our normal life. So canceled plans, the homeschooling and things like that.
Right. I think one of the things that that has been important for all of us to acknowledge is the loss. There are big losses and little losses, right? So it's okay to feel sad about those things and to feel, that we feel disappointed and hurt that, all the plans that we had, it's funny when I look at my calendar, January, if I look at my monthly calendar, it was filled with stuff. February was filled with stuff. The first couple of weeks of March filled with stuff. And then as we move forward, if I look back at my calendar from this year, it's like things begin, X, that's not happening, that's not happening, that's canceled. You know, and then there was a little while, there was nothing on my calendar. And it's, you know, still kind of that way. So I think acknowledging the losses that we've experienced, you know, and allowing ourselves to feel that. I think one thing we all have to be mindful and attentive to is what is our cognitive narrative. You know, we all have a running commentary in our heads all the time about everything, and we have to be careful. Because if our cognitive narrative is something, you know, is an escalating, catastrophic cognitive narrative, like, this is awful, this is horrible, I can't stand it, I can't take it, you know, we're going to feel that way. We're going to feel overwhelmed and stressed. If we are mindful about what we're saying to ourselves about the situation, if we're saying like, okay, this is tough, but I'm going to get through, or I'm having a hard day today, what can I do to help myself through this day? Is there someone I need to call? Do I need to take a time out? Do I need to step away? You know, what can I do right now to help myself through this? You know, and give ourselves permission to do that. But I think definitely being mindful about, you know, what is the meaning that we are attaching to all of our experiences, and what are we saying to ourselves about that? You know, one of the things that's been a real challenge moving forward here in Southwest Virginia is, you know, we're maybe 50-50 on people wearing masks. And so depending upon where you go. And so I'm seeing a lot of people who are really angry when they're out and they see someone who's not wearing a mask. And when I talk with them about that, I find out that their cognitive narrative is something like, how dare they? Don't they know they're putting me at risk? You know, how selfish can you be to not wear a mask, right? And if you're saying that to yourself, that's how you're feeling. And I'm not saying that you have to lie to yourself and say like, it's awesome that they're not wearing a mask, you know, because you're not going to believe that. But if you say, you know, we're all just doing the best that we can, I can't control whether they wear a mask, but I can control my own behaviors. I can, you know, give them a little more distance. You know, I can make sure that I'm always wearing my mask as a good model. You know, confronting someone else about not wearing a mask isn't going to be helpful. But just being mindful about what you're saying to yourself about any given situation. You're either escalating yourself in a negative way, or you're, you know, staying calm and rational and in a good, reasonable space.
Okay, how about you, Tammy? What are your thoughts on that same question?
Pretty much the same thing. I was going to say, assume the best. I keep going back to that. You
assume good. I always say assume good. That's mine. Yeah.
Assume the best. You're saying a lot of things I say to my clients. I use that same one, but assume the best and take care, manage what you can control. Again, going back to what are the things I can control? I can control whether I wear a mask or how close I get to those who do not. And I can control whether I smile. Well, they can't see my smile, you know, how I interact with that person or not. And if you do want to ask, I mean, to be okay saying, you know, we're practicing social distancing. Could I have a little more space here? If you need to set a boundary or ask for what you need, you can do so politely. You know, you don't address someone with an aggressive attitude or anger. You know, whenever you do need to address something like that, to do so gently and calmly, and assume the positive there instead of the negative.
A little bit of humor can go a long way too. Like I just ran into a situation last week where our daughter is with us temporarily, and so we were somewhere, we were out, we were I think walking in the neighborhood, and one of our neighbors approached, and I said, "Oh, this is our daughter," and they went to shake her hand. And you know, I used a little bit of humor. I like stepped in and I was like, no, stop, social distancing. You're not allowed to shake hands, you know, and we all kind of laughed and it was okay. Right.
Yeah. Assume those things are not intentional.
Correct. Yeah.
How about you, Josh, in the workplace? What have you run across?
Well, you know, it's everyone, the story you tell in your head, and I guess I got to keep telling everyone, including myself, is don't start believing that future story that you've invented, because it hasn't happened yet, you know, and you start going down that path, and then you find you're all stressed out and you're like, that didn't even come close to happening. You know, I always talk about that. I've talked about this before, like keeping a catastrophe journal. Like when you think of these things that are going to happen, write it down and then wait a week or two and look back and then see, you know, or you write down what you think so bad, what's going to happen, what's the result, and then go back and revisit that and see, well, it really didn't happen at all.
It is called catastrophic thinking, Josh, by the way. Like that, there is a name for that. It's called catastrophic thinking.
There we go. But yeah, so that's a big key, you know, just trying not to believe that story. And you know, it's difficult, you know, because like I said, it changes all the time, but that's kind of what we focus on.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that, you know, we went 3 months without any sports activities on the fields. And then last week we got a list of, okay, there's all these games next week because we're into the next phase. And, you know, the staff kind of had to do uh-oh, here we go. You know, it's game time for them as well as people being out and about. So just those differing mindsets and adjusting to those situations as they come up, because we don't have control over that. So, you know, and we got the crew together, explained that to them, and, you know, they're ready to go. So, you know, I think it goes back to that communication. I'll keep you for a minute, Josh. Our next question was, how can we ensure that we're maintaining our relationships, both with family, spouse, friends, your kids, and then your employees, both those you supervise and those who supervise you?
I mean, it kind of comes down to what we keep saying, the communication part. It's just, you got to be an active participant in all their lives. It can't just kind of step back and just let everything happen. And so, and it gets, you know, you know, when we first started in March, none of us worked together. So it was really, that's when it was the most difficult. And now, you know, since April, we've all been in every day. So we see each other, but also too, we do still try to keep our distances. So we all go on our separate mower or whatever. And it is hard, you know, I thought about that too. You do have to try to re-engage, and, you know, and then also too, like when arriving at home, I can't be the tired dad, like, oh, I just worked. You know, my wife has put in some really hard work too, with the kids, and it's coming home and being active and engaged there also. And not, it's almost just never let your guard down, just actively working on it's the best thing.
Okay, how about some thoughts, Lisa, on the same topic?
I think it comes back to the communication. You know, relationships require work. They don't just happen. So if you're going to maintain your relationship with your spouse or, you know, with your administration, your coworkers, your employees, it does require work and effort. We're all really tired right now. You know, life's been hard. At the same time, right, those relationships can also be fulfilling and energizing for us as well. You know, my first day back in the office, I was totally excited to come back and, you know, see the office staff who's been here. You know, it was that little bit of normalcy, you know, felt so good. You know, but I definitely think, you know, recognizing that those relationships take work and effort. You know, we want to bring our best to that. You know, we want to try to be open and present. And, you know, as Tammy said earlier, you know, one of the most important factors in being a good communicator is the listening as well. One thing that I found throughout my 30 years as a therapist is we all want to feel heard. We want to feel heard, and we want to be significant. We want to be valued. And so, you know, any way that we can communicate that to the people in our lives is important.
So Tammy, can you expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. This is my favorite thing, quality time. It is a love language. It is what all relationships require. And when I say time, everybody cringes because we all think we don't have enough of it, but we do. And especially if we want relationships to work, we've got to make that time. And if you can find time that is relaxed, where you reduce the stress around you. At our house, we have a hot tub on our deck, and raising teenagers, I've advised many families to invest in hot tubs because we would have hot tub talk time at night. Jody and I and the kids would sit in there, and sometimes I have to tell my introverted son to quit talking to Jody. It's time for bed. You know, that you have to find the time, and hopefully in a less stressful environment, to just relax. And when you do that, listen attentively, ask questions, be genuinely interested, be patient, because I know sometimes, especially if you're with children, wanting them to know they're really heard, it's so easy to get frustrated with a 6-year-old who's having a tantrum. But it really takes that patience and that persistence to just be there until they can, you know, say what they need to say and to feel heard then. So again, finding the least stressful environment and making time and asking. I mean, you don't know if you want to maintain that relationship. You may just have to say, hey, to your employer or your employee, you know, you got some time, let's go grab lunch. You have to make time for it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll go back over to Josh. And how are some of the ways that you've tried to stay positive and be a good leader in the workplace?
I mean, it's just, if it's kind of like almost with the kids, you got to model the behavior, you know. And I find when I get real complainy, then the rest of the staff does, and trying to catch myself with that. And you know, that's the most difficult part about this is we're all stressed, so we let that guard down a little bit more, and maybe we talk, you know, a little more down than we're used to, or we're not, you know, who knows what's happening at the home too, trying to deal with everything. And like I said, my stress has been trying to keep everyone employed right now. And, you know, and so, you know, it's just, and then it's going back and trying to come up with some foundations, you know, either like the reading or like for me, the guitar playing, or like I said, maybe you try the meditation, or maybe you try journaling, you know, try to find that one thing that is your release, you know. Luckily I've been having to mow a lot more, which has been great. So I've been doing the podcast and mowing. That's a nice way. For any of the work, you know, listen to a podcast, listen to some kind of positive message or some kind of education, even learning, you know, trying to learn something new. I think Lisa mentioned that, you know, maybe there's some kind of avenue to go down that keeps you positive, but it's really modeling that and trying to keep that, you know, with the staff, but also too, the listening. Like, I'm not shutting down any of the negative comments as much as I might have in the past too, because people just they said they do want to be heard. So you're trying to allow that space for people to speak freely.
Well, that's good ideas. I wish they would let me out on a mower, but the union setting, I can't do that. So, but you mentioned, you know, keeping the workforce, not laying anybody off. So, you know, unfortunately, we've had some open positions that haven't been filled. So those are on hold, but that leads to a different set of stresses and pressures, because now the existing workforce has to pick up that slack and keep going. And we're telling them, yep, those other couple people to come into the workforce, we're not going to have them maybe till October, November. And you got to pick up the slack. So, you know, it's been a challenge dealing with that, but, you know, we've got a good group, so it's been working, and, you know, we've been communicating with them. Lisa, from the clinical side, what are some of the things that you would recommend about setting that example, being that leader, and staying positive?
So in the recovery field, in, you know, AA and NA and the 12-step programs, they have this saying that says, fake it till you make it. And in psychology, we call it the as-if principle. Act as if you feel a particular way and you might feel that way. So one of those is sometimes you just have to put on like you're positive, like I'm the manager, I'm the leader, I set the tone. You may not feel it on the inside, but sometimes if, you know, we've all probably had that experience where we had to go to a social event, a party we didn't really want to go to, and we're like, ugh, I really don't want to go. Like, why did I say yes? Why did I say I would go? And we get there and we're like, hi, how are you? Yes. You know, and as we, you know, sort of act that way, we sort of find that, hey, wait a second, I am having a good time, right? Because I was faking it at first, but, you know, now that I'm here and I'm into it, I'm feeling it, right? So sometimes in the worst, hardest times, that may just be what you have to do. Like, you just have to be the manager, you just have to be the leader and set the tone, right? Now, obviously, I think it would be better if we can be in that space, right? Goes back to the self-care again, right? Like, what do you need to do in order to be in a good space at the start of your day, right? Is there some ritual? In my household, we don't have a hot tub, Tammy. I've been trying to get my husband to get one for years. Like, maybe I'm going to tell him now. Tammy recommended that we get a hot tub.
It works. It really works.
I'll talk to him, Lisa.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Any of you out there who know my husband, tell him you should get a hot tub. So we have this, our ritual is, you know, we start the day with coffee on the back deck.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we sit out on our back deck and we drink coffee. That's how we start the day. Yep. And we start it out in a nice, supportive, you know, way. My husband and I send each other off for the day. You know, I tell him, I give my husband a kiss and I tell him, like, have a good day. You know, I got your back. And he tells me, have a good day, you know, heal the world. right? So I know, I know he's out there. We go and do what we got to do, and when we come back, our next ritual is, after we have dinner, we walk every night. And we just talk and we look at what flowers are blooming and what birds are trying to nest in our backyard. And, like, let's remember, like, the world is going on. Like, we do have this pandemic that is, hitting the human race, but so much of, the world is still, birds are still nesting and flowers are still blooming and grass is still growing. So, we have to try to remember that and stay connected with the things that are important to us.
Right.
Oh, great. Tammy, what are some of the things that you would recommend?
What occurred to me that hasn't been said maybe is to remember we're part of a team, to just keep the team mindset in mind whenever we want to stay positive. This is my turn to step up to bat a few more times. This is my turn to kind of be here a little bit more, to step up, and to know that it won't be this way all the time, and to tell your team, next week it may be you that we're calling on for a little extra. And so I think just remembering we're a team at work and we're a team at home, and that can help us see it's not all just one person. We're all in this together.
All right, some great insight. Kristen, do we have time to take some questions?
It doesn't look like we have any questions from the audience unless someone wants to type one in or raise their hand to ask our panelists.
I don't see anything. One of the things that you had mentioned, Lisa, before we wrap it up, is on the, being positive and saying, here's what we need to do. One of the things I try to do with our decision makers is I never say, I think this. I tell them, I know if we do this, it's going to result in that. And that helps them to understand that you do know what you're talking about. And, you've got a plan and they can follow that plan. So that's one of the things I try to get out there in that communication process. So seeing no other questions, I think we're just about at an hour.
I do.
Oh, you got something?
There is one more question.
Okay.
If you have one specific takeaway from this meeting, what would it be?
We'll go with Josh first.
I mean, we've talked about it before, but it's really paying attention to that voice in your head and just not following it down a dark path. I mean, it's okay to plan and think about things, but just remember it's not true. It may be, but trying to just be careful and I mean, there's a lot of great things. I'm enjoying how much time I'm getting with my family, for the first time in many years, and realizing how much I had been missing too. And and it's almost a tightness with the staff, enjoying that moment, because here it's kind of, for a couple months, it was just us on this campus. We haven't seen, now we're starting to see more student athletes, and that's been enjoyable. And, and kind of going back to basics with, with everything, like taking all the knowledge we've had for all these years and like I said, really enjoying the moment for what it is. And there's lots of good that is happening right now.
Okay. How about you, Lisa? What do you want to?
Mine would be look for the good, right? Like I it's a little bit easier for me. I happen to be a natural born optimist. Like, I'm a glass half full person. And so I would say look for the good. Right. There's we hear stories, at the start, we all saw the bad stories about people hoarding toilet paper and having fights in the aisles at Walmart over toilet paper. And, those types of things are, not easy to see, but if we look for the good, it's there, right? We started seeing stories of people caring for one another, people delivering meals to our frontline workers, of people checking in on their elderly neighbors, of people grocery shopping for someone else. Like, look for the good, it's there. Little things. I had little girls paint little rocks and leave them in my mailbox. Multiple days I'd open my mailbox and there was this little happy thing from these little kids who weren't going to school, and it was their way of taking care of their neighbors. It's what they could do, right? And so they painted little happy rocks for me. So, and other neighbors, I wasn't the only one, but, look for the good because it's there. It's all around us. And sometimes we forget that it's there, but, that's not what shows up on TV. The big, the big negative things show up, but But the good is there in small ways all around us. And if we look for it, we'll see it.
Okay, how about you, Tammy?
I think it would come down to take good care of yourself, and therefore so you can care for others better, and do so with compassion and not assuming the best.
And I guess for me, it would be, it's okay to, feel these different emotions and the different things that are coming around, but then it's putting together a plan to deal with that, and make sure you're including your family, your coworkers, and keeping people in that conversation, both to help you and to help them. So I think that that's great. We've had a number of comments going back and forth. I think that's really good, people interacting with each other. Susan Haddock mentioned that they do a virtual happy hour on Wednesdays from 5 to 6. I don't know if anybody can get in on that, but our town manager started that as a way of getting the employees to connect. So, 200 something employees, and we all got in, and he just had a topic each week that he kind of went over and then threw it out for questions and answered, and, just kind of to touch base and say, yep, town government's still here, and, we're trying to do our best to help you out. So things like that. There was another one dealing with somebody who tested positive, because that can cause a lot of stresses. And I think it's really important to have at work an in-place protocol to handle those things, which we did in Lexington. We've had 3 different staff members test positive, but we had ways to deal with that. And we talked to the employees that were in their group. We did the proper quarantining. They got the retested. We did that, and it made the employees feel a little more comfortable to know that something was in place, that we weren't just saying, oh yeah, don't worry about it. Joe will be back in a couple of weeks and everything will be fine. We had things in place. I think that's really important as well. Go to your workplace and make sure that they've got those things. We stress the employee assistance program a lot where we are. It's a free service. Pick up the phone and call them on a number of issues. And we've distributed cards, flyers to our employees. Again, just as another tool that they have to help them deal with what's going on right now. And they're not always listening to me. So just that other voice that they can talk to. So with that, Kristen, I think we're ready to wrap it up. I certainly want to thank our panelists, Lisa, Tammy, and Josh. I think we got some great information. And as always, we always look to STMA to deliver. These town halls have been really productive, and I think just a way to connect everybody. And again, people have those feelings. Even people that were listening in may not be, up to sharing, but getting that information, I think is really good that STMA, the board, and Kim and Kristen and staff have put these together. And moving forward, I think, Kristen, we have another one coming up on August 11th.
Yes.
Okay. So, look for that, stma.org, or certainly as the emails come through. So, again, thank you, Lisa, Josh, and Tammy. Thank you, Kristen and Kim. I'll turn it back to you, Kristen.
All right. I think that's all for today. So thank you all for joining us, and be well and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.